Slow down, lay your burden down. Slow down.
Hey, welcome to Divergent Paths with Dan Dunford, and I am Dan Dunford, the ye old host of the podcast. Episode 6. Yeah, let's do it. Thank you to those of you who are subscribed and listening on a weekly basis and giving me feedback. I really appreciate it. I love doing this, and it's nice to know that some people are listening. And yeah, this is really one of my favorite things to do. So, thank you for listening. This week, fun episode, but I mean, let's be honest, I do say that about all of them. Adrianna Mateo, she is a wonderful violinist. We had a good talk, and she's, yeah, street noise. What are you going to do? It's New York. But yes, Adrianna's done a number of great things. She's been involved with Bang on a Can. She does regular concerts at the Metropolitan Museum. She successfully kickstarted her own album this past summer. That'll be released in January. We talk about that a bit. So yeah, I mean, we cover social media and differing approaches and all this stuff. It's really great. She's a wonderful musician, and I'm glad to call her my friend. So a couple things about this episode in particular. There is a little bit of an issue later in the podcast. Their computer chewed up about 4 seconds of the audio. I do have a backup recorder that I run throughout my interviews, so I just splice that in, but there is a noticeable shift in recording quality for about 4 seconds. So yes, I do realize that. Another quick thing is that generally after I do the intro, I usually have a little snippet of my wonderful theme song by Katie Geringer. This week it's going to be a little different. Adrianna asked me to put in a couple extra clips of her own music, which I was more than happy to do, to kind of give context and frame herself as a musician and where she comes from and the kind of things that go into her music making. So there are 2 clips before the interview and then a full song at the end. Before the interview, there is about 60 seconds of a piece entitled Lean Back and Release, which was written for Adrianna by the composer Molly Joyce a few years ago. It's a piece for violin and electronics, and it's a really cool joint. It's only 60 seconds of a 7-minute song. You can hear the rest of that song on Adrianna's SoundCloud, which I will give you at the end of the intro. The second piece is a song called August Sun. It's more of a folk type song. It's beautiful, and I love listening to it. And at the end of the episode is a single from Adrianna's album, which will be coming out, like I said, around January, and that's called Like a Little Kid with a Raging Heart, it's a rock song, and it's great. You can hear some of her influences that we talk about in the episode. We specifically address that song, I really enjoy it. So listen to that at the end. If you want to check out Adrianna's music and what else she's doing, she's on Facebook. It's facebook.com/Adriannas.violin. Twitter and Instagram, she's at Adrianna Mateo, and you can check her SoundCloud out to hear the full versions of the 2 songs that come on before the intro. SoundCloud.com/Adrianna Mateo, and to get regular updates and all of that, sometimes in a longer format. Also check out her Tumblr, her website Tumblr. It's adriannamateo.tumblr.com. So yeah, check that stuff out, and please, share the podcast, subscribe, give me a review on iTunes if you like it. It's that's helpful for me. And come hear me play. I'll be doing my ringer business with the Manus Orchestra. Love being hired by them to play after being a student there. Doing some cool music, some Tchaikovsky, some Beethoven. And then Saturday night, come out to the Way Station in Brooklyn. I'll be playing with the delightful, funktastic band Sharif Keys and the Groove. It's 11 p.m. set, but totally worth it because those guys are awesome. So, enjoy the songs from Adrianna and have fun with the interview. Thanks, guys.
The bright August sun bears a face that is false. Soon fall will come, glistening gold leaves of loss. The honey-colored moon is waning thin, bringing high tides of the memories of him. Will you be my August sun? Will you be my August sun? There is some time before summer's done. Will you be my August sun?
So I was thinking about this on my train ride this afternoon, with someone who does as many just from composer concerts. I know you've collaborated with my friend Rosalie Burrell on many times, on different things.
Actually, that's her piece.
Yeah, exactly. Right there you go. Sitting right there. Well, I hope I can get her in to talk to her sometime when she's actually here. But so you do that, and then you do these rock things, and you do wedding gigs and all this stuff. So a lot of things you create yourself. My question is, my first thought was, what do you listen to on your, just when you're on the subway, just on your own time with your violin on your back?
Oh, God. Do you really want to know?
Yes. I mean, I find that I rarely listen to anything related to what I am playing, or a lot of brass players listen to Mahler all the time, and I'm just like, don't
overdose.
No, thank you.
Yeah, yeah. I find it that is very much the same for me as well. It's changed a lot. Recently, as in today and yesterday, I've been getting back into John Mayer, who I feel best approximates the model of which I'd like to follow. Mm-hmm. All the other tabloid stuff aside. I like listening to stuff that has a kind of pop sound to it, even though it might not be necessarily pop. Recently it's been, like Nicki Minaj, Taylor Swift, Sia. I really like Sia. I find that it's kind of heavy sometimes just because of the production, it's so dense. I like the vocal on Beyonce's latest album. So I've been listening to that a lot. Also, because for the upcoming gigs I have at the Met Museum, a composer friend of mine who secretly, guiltily loves Beyonce, I was like, you should write a virtuosic adaptation for violin and piano. So just doing some research, just being like, oh, that's what she does with her voice. So how do I do that on violin? Now it changes, right? Like depending on the time of day and everything. I love Keith Jarrett. I love The Melody at Night with You. That album is gorgeous. Bill Evans Trio. The thing is, both those albums are very difficult to listen to when you have the subway going, it's like, oh, he just covered up the snare, and like the piano just like, we don't have the resolution of the phrase and it's driving me crazy. So those are for the quieter nights. And once in a while, I will listen to Brahms and maybe not Mozart, maybe Haydn, because I find that listening to that just kind of activates the parts of my brain that are like, oh, you should do this with your hands. You should, it just kind of highlights those pathways of like, oh, that's what he did to do that slide. And so now we can just take that and import it into our playing. And it's a way for me to kind of practice without practicing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So when you do that kind of just wide-ranging listening, do you not actively, because sometimes you just want to listen and not deal with active thought, but occasionally do you're just listening along and hey, this four bar phrase has something that I want to use now. This is like going to inform my playing on my next whatever it is. Does that happen to you?
It happens all the time, to be honest. Even when I'm not actively listening, I kind of am, which is nice. It's also kind of exhausting, like when you're out, because you're just like, oh, that thing's really cool. Wait, what were you saying? And that happens all the time. Drives everybody crazy, including me. But I mean, all the time in my head, I'm like, oh, that would be good for the record. Oh, that would be a really cool, like, oh, how do they do that? And I find that there's certain styles of violin playing that my body's just like, nope, we're not going to do this. Like bluegrass, there's a certain degree of like looseness and not the kind of bright presence of tone that my body's just like, we have no idea how to do this. So yeah, vocally, like that stuff happens a lot more because it's more of a new instrument for me. So that's why I'm listening more and more to vocalists, because I'm finding that is much more of a valuable education than listening to what I already know how to do.
Of course. That makes sense. So basically, who are you? Where are you from? Like, why do you live here? Like New York, why are you one of the pool of millions of or tens of thousands of violinists at least who live here?
Well, wow, that's a very vast question.
Isn't it though?
Why do you exist? Basically.
It's it's the real shit here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, how long of a version do you want? How much should we zoom in here?
I mean, just like what, where'd you grow up? Where are your parents? What do your parents do? Like, is this like a musical lifestyle that you started when you were 18 months old or what?
Well, my mom is a nurse, critical care nurse, and my dad is a doctor. He's an internist, specializing in cancer and blood disorders. My grandmother was kind of training to be a concert pianist, and because of the time and where she lived, the Philippines, her family strongly discouraged her from pursuing music as a career. So I kind of saw that as like, well, she wasn't able to do what she really wanted to do, so maybe now's the time for me to do what I really want to do. Even though I experienced much of the same resistance, although like different reasons. Like instead of you're going to be on the streets and penniless and and giving back to your family. It's like, you're going to be on the streets and penniless, but you're, don't you want a stable job? And, the reputation that comes with being in the medical field. And all this wasn't so overt, but those were the strong implications of, like, you don't want to practice more. You want to go into science research, right? In school, you don't like any of the science fields. Okay. Do you like psychology? We know you like psychology because you're reading up on it. And I'm like, just because I'm reading up on it, obviously that's not, like... But you can't really explain all this when you're a kid, and so you just kind of push. And that's kind of how I've gotten to where I am.
And so where was this happening? Did you grow up in the Philippines?
No, I didn't. Although that would have been really nice in some ways. I grew up in Queens. Mm-hmm. Go Queens. Yes. There's a little fist pump for you because you can't see what I'm actually doing.
Visual cues work great on podcasts. It's a thing.
So yeah, I grew up in Queens, Maspeth, which, if you have never been there, is a place that's kind of immune to the winds of change, just because there are no subway lines that really go through the area. So there's some Polish bakeries there that are still the same from when I was like 5. And my elementary school was like 5, I wouldn't say 5 blocks, probably about 10 blocks from my house. So in some ways it was a very weird, slightly suburban upbringing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Slightly.
As suburban as Queens can be, I suppose.
Right. Well, you'd be surprised. It was a very, very quiet Italian neighborhood when I grew up. It's in some ways very different from the way that it is now. And that was just the kind of perfect... oh God, it's going to be so geeky. It's kind of the perfect petri dish for my sister and me.
Come on, your parents are both in the medical field. It's fine. It's the thing. I mean, you can't like eradicate that from your being.
I know, but I really try to not be geeky, but it comes out. But anyway, yes, when there are not too many distractions in your neighborhood and not too much stuff going on, then that creates the perfect environment for you and your sister to like become kind of competitive over, I can play flute better, I can play violin better, I can play piano better. Well, I can conduct now, so now what? Well, okay, you're conducting, I'm going to compose.
So, what's the relationship? I mean, what's the age difference between you and your sister?
2 years.
And you are which one?
I'm the younger one.
Oh, even better.
Yes. Competitive spirit.
And since she's also a musician.
I would say that she's more of a scientist now because she's now in her PhD for public health. But
I guess that would. Sorry? Yeah, I guess that would be. That would mean that you've gone in one direction.
Yeah. Yeah. But she, keeps up with music and she likes it a lot and sometimes still plays.
So, you were both growing up like practicing at the same time.
Oh yes.
and just her being goading each other into being better, I suppose. Or at least to win this round. Was there a lot of music around that kind of pushed you in that direction? Because, going from, just as speaking, both my parents were in the military, and so that was kind of, we're not super crazy, gun freaks, just they were in the Navy for a while.
Yeah.
And then, so, like, that was a thing that I ended up doing for a bit, it was, but there wasn't, for some reason, I just happened into music as opposed, So what was it that, like, from a household where it's all, like, a specific field all the time, just that's what it is, it's just how it is.
Yeah.
Like, what was that pushed you in the direction of the music?
Short answer would be Disney.
Hey!
Ariel, yes, so epic. That was like everything when I was a kid.
The Alan Menken and...
Yeah, oh my God, soaring melodic lines and visuals, just so great. Plus, like, really cute guy leads.
Oh.
Just like everything. Perfect. But the longer story to this would be, I guess music was always a source of emotional expression. And that sounds really stupid and bland in general, but what I mean by that is that in my family, they're not very adept at expressing their emotions. It's very difficult for them, any range of emotions. And so music would be the way for them. It was kind of like a pressure valve in the house, right? Like, I can't speak English. My grandmother would come over, and she was the one who surprise ordered a piano to the house, by the way. She was just like, oh yeah, I got this piano for you guys. And this piano just shows up on our doorstep with these movers just being like, oh, this is supposed to be here, right? And my mother was very confused. But anyway, this magical box shows up on our doorstep, and then my grandmother would come over and play this like kind of ragtime stuff, and my sister and I would just take turns running back and forth, just screaming at the top of our lungs because it was so fun. So that's kind of the seed of actually creating music, how that kind of started. My grandmother would start teaching my sister how to play, and then I was too young to learn, and so I would start copying them when they were done. But then my dad would bring in kind of different elements because he used to be a sound guy in college, and I didn't find this out until pretty recently. And it makes sense because he would play Brahms and Beethoven, but he would also play Billy Idol and Pink Floyd. Especially when my mom wasn't around. So you get the range of things, and then you see, they also, my parents and I, is what I mean. No, not my parents and I, just my parents. I was too young. I don't know what I'm talking about. My parents had us involved in music lessons because my grandmother was like, they're gifted, they should do this. I don't know if that was actually true. But they had us going to these Saturday music lessons, and just seeing, I remember this magical moment when I looked into this like porthole of a window, because they had these round windows in the doors at Queen's College, where I went for pre-collegiate studies. And there are these 2 rows of little kids my age, and they were playing Suzuki violin, and they were all just moving in exactly the same way, playing exactly the same thing, and that to me was incredibly magical, because you weren't just plunking notes out of a keyboard, you weren't just pushing keys down, it involved your entire, you had to move. And that to me was incredibly liberating to see this, and to see like it's also a social connection. It's these kids getting together doing the same thing. They don't need to talk. They don't need to embarrass themselves. They just need to play together. And so that to me was just super amazing. And so that day I was just like, I need to play violin. I need to play violin. And my mom was like, you have a piano. I'm like, no, violin's where it's at. So that's how that happened.
So when, starting a violin, on any string instrument, you go through fairly specific and similar. Everyone kind of goes through the same processes initially for the first however many years they study. Obviously, some kids go in different paths depending on their learning style, but the great majority of people kind of follow the same trajectory until a certain point. What was it that made you diverge from that? Oh man, divergent paths. Hey, how about that? It's the name of the podcast, guys. Not even intentional. But seriously, what made you split off and start? Was it in high school? Was it in school? Where did you go to school?
For
collegiate, not pre-collegiate. Got that.
For my bachelor's, I went to Queen's College, the Aaron Copland School of Music. So wait, continue your question.
So where was it there that you started splitting off and being less enamored with some of the traditional places that violin is used.
Right.
Obviously, you do a lot of new things with traditional formats. A lot of your music is in that vein. But what made you like split off?
Okay. A lot of people has asked me this question. Have asked me this question, and it's interesting. It's always interesting to me because that's what it looks like. It looks like that I've split off, but to me, it seems very natural. My process, as you might have been able to tell from my very lengthy explanations of your pretty simple questions, is that I go from point A and I go to point C, D, and E before going to B, and that's just because along those other routes you're gathering the information to get to B. So growing up listening to rock, metal, asking these guys in my class, like, what are you listening to? Dream Theater. I think that would be super cool, putting it on, in the car, and my parents just being like, no, we're not listening to this. Then just listening to it in my room, and George Carlin and all sorts of things. It's just kind of, you have this language besides classical that you're developing, and it intersects with classical, but it's not necessarily the same as classical. And it's this kind of, this pool that you keep filling over years and years. In middle school, I thought that Eminem was the best thing ever, and I still think he is in some ways. And paying, because the little rebel inside of you just being like, I'm not going to be a classical musician, I'm not going to be just this thing that you want me to be, but of course you still keep playing violin because you love it. So you do these things, you listen to things outside, and then in high school where I went to high school, they didn't really have a music program. I went to school at Townsend Harris, and it was a wonderful education. They did not have a classical program, which is really devastating when you have to work so hard in school and there's no kind of there's no musical release from the constant just really, really working hard all the time. That school is very, very difficult in many ways. And so, I would actually teach the class at 7 in the morning because that's the only time that they could have it. I would teach people who were my age and older, conducting. And then I would go to the poetry club and I would write and, really do, channel my writing and my creativity through very formal kinds of poetry, like sestinas, where you only use the same 6 words at the end of each line, and each of the 6 or 7, maybe I'm mistaken here, each of those, what are they called? Not paragraphs. What are they called? Oh God, I'm embarrassed. Stanzas. Thank you. Oh gosh. Oh, that's embarrassing. And each of these stanzas have a certain order in which these 6 words must occur, and then the last one, the form is the stanza is truncated, and there's 3 lines each, and you need to put, it's like 1, 3, 4, 2, and it's like, it's crazy. It's really difficult. Writing those kinds of poems, I guess honing my chops that way, in addition to suddenly listening to jazz and being like, oh, Bill Evans is wonderful, and so is Stefan Grappelli, and so are all these other things that you listen to secretively in your bedroom because your parents just probably would not understand, particularly George Carlin.
That's yeah.
But it was great. It was wonderful. I loved it. Go ahead.
I think about it a lot, and I talk about it, but there's an interesting correlation between how stand-up comedy works and how music works, and how you structure. If you're doing an hour of music, how you structure and you bring in certain ideas, touch on certain ideas to come up back to them, 25 minutes later, right. Or structuring things for crowd response. Oh, well, like, I don't want to burn this off in the first 15 minutes, but yeah, no, so like, I just find that fascinating every time someone like actually brings that up. So, continue.
Oh, that's fine. Sorry, I'm just going and going, which is what I tend to do. Like Jesse Eisenberg, but without any of that charm.
Charm? Have you seen him in the newest Superman trailer?
No, I want to see him. I think he's great.
He's just in the trailer and he's like doing this weird Lex Luthor-y thing. It's like the red capes are coming, and I'm just like, that's a little much, but I'm glad you're having fun.
I just stopped when they mentioned that he's going to be Lex Luthor, because I'm like, I cannot imagine him bald.
I saw them on the promo photos, and it's pretty jarring.
Yeah, just that he has that full head of hair.
That mop.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yes. Right. So, getting back to thank you. Yes. Again, DE. Before we get to B.
Absolutely. That's the point. It's great. It's more fun. We can stop and talk about Jesse Eisenberg for a minute.
Yes. Jesse Eisenberg. I want to meet him someday.
Wouldn't it? He seems to be. I wonder if he's. I mean, from what I've heard, he's like really nice, but like the neurotic thing isn't as much of an act as you might think.
Yeah. From what I've read, yeah. But it would be nice to meet him in person, give him the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, totally.
But yes, okay. So high school, doing all these different things, and the English teachers being like, "Hey, listen to this," but not with your parents around. Just being like, "Okay, you know best." And going. Oh, I went to a lot of poetry readings and read my stuff for a lot of poets, which is really cool. 92nd Street Y has this wonderful program where they had like Seamus Heaney coming in, and Jack Gilbert, whom I love his work. A whole bunch of other poets, a lot of female poets whose names I'm forgetting shamefully. I'll come back to it if it's important. But then,
sorry. So you're talking about reading your poetry in public for these things. Not when you, as a musician, you can, it is difficult to get up and perform, but you are to some extent hiding behind an instrument in a way.
This is true.
Even if it's an instrument as small as violin, but it's still a chore. So we'll get back to what you were to the main through line, but the concept of performing poetry is a very, very vulnerable medium to read in person, and was that something that that allowed you to really do more risky things later in your life? Did you feel prepared in some ways by those early readings as a teenager and if it didn't at all, it's okay. I can cut all this out so I don't look like an idiot. But
yes, editing.
But did that like translate into later in your life when you started doing more risky things in front of groups of people?
Let's see. Well, that is also taking the presupposition that I'm doing risky things in front of people, which I'm actually, to me, it doesn't feel like I am.
To an outside, like to someone who's not you.
Yes,
I
know everything is so much inside my head.
It's for me. I mean, I do my own things and my own projects, but spreading oneself across. What is this?
Spreading oneself across.
Spreading oneself so widely across so many different things can seem risky to someone who doesn't do that as much. And of course it's different when you're thinking about it yourself.
Right. I'm just laughing just because I spend so much time alone that in my head I'm like, I'm the only person. This is not good. I need to go to a cafe just so I'm around other people and I remember that there are other people. But yes, just so I can actually recall your question, what you just said. Sorry.
Poetry, risky things.
Yes. Well, sorry, it's really embarrassing.
No, it's...
Ooh, good thing you can't see me blushing. I blush very easily and embarrass easily. Well, poetry was... I think it was primarily a way to gain some... I guess it was very much a way to feel listened to, right? Because at home it was very... we still are very kind of insular people. The way that we would connect would be to like watch TV together, which you don't really talk while you're doing that, or listening to music together, which again you don't really talk, and music was a way to kind of to bridge those silences, because you can kind of feel the temperature in a room when somebody's like upset, and if you play this piece of music that they really like, then you can just kind of feel the temperature just returning to normal.
Mm-hmm.
And poetry was a way to kind of verbalize all of these unspoken feelings, to verbalize fear, to verbalize sadness, to verbalize the beginnings of sexual awakening that you can't really talk with your parents about, right? Super awkward. Like, you thought you couldn't talk about anything before. Like, you really can't talk about this. And as well as all these other things. And when you're reading in front of all of your peers, upperclassmen, these, I would say that there were like maybe 50 to 70 people who would show up at these. Maybe less. Maybe in my head there were so many more. But when they're looking at you and expecting you to say something, like, thank God you have a script in front of you, right? You have these lines that you very carefully constructed, or somebody else very carefully constructed. And it was a kind of platform for performing under the scariest circumstances. Because you have a critical audience with a very short attention span, very short. And you don't really have the bells and whistles of a jock or like one of the popular girls. You have this, like, you play violin that's like super, in a way it's super isolating and super dorky, because nobody really does that, or did that, I should say. I mean, some people did for fun, but not very seriously. So when you have this plan, this, whatever, 5 stanzas in front of you, and you have to deliver, and you need to hold the attention of these people the entire time, that gives you the resources to do that when you're playing an instrument, or when you're teaching a classroom, for that matter.
So great. Yeah, exactly. That's what I was shooting for. So then back to the, talking about, I mean, you're saying that you don't really view what you do as splitting off from the norm. It's more of a kind of an amalgamation of everything.
Yeah.
As opposed to something different. It's itself.
Right.
So, be that as it may, when did you start doing that musically?
Musically, I think I kind of started here and there in high school. I mean, before then, maybe just playing around here and there, but it was mostly listening. It was mostly getting that library in your head. In high school, I started playing like electric violin and figuring out that it's not really for me. It's kind of clunky and you don't get as much tone. And that was before I actually like started playing around with pedals and once again figuring out, it's not for me. I have some serious admiration for the people who do use those. It's just I find it very difficult because it requires so much patience to find something that is really resonant with what you have. What that the concept of your sound is, and maybe it's just I don't have the right concept of sound for that. I don't know. So I started in high school trying out things in jazz band, figuring out like jazz isn't really when you actually plot out every note of your solo. Okay. So there's that, and then what happened, I guess, towards the end of high school is that I just very narrowly focused on violin because I was in some ways very behind. I had teachers switching, in and out, and so the progress was kind of stilted. And so I met Renee Joless, who performs with the Orpheus Chamber Orchestra, and she's just wonderful in every possible way that you could be wonderful. I met her super focused on violin, doing some things here and there. But once I hit college, I was still studying with her. She was like, you should really focus on violin. And in my head, I was like, I really appreciate that advice, but I'm not going to listen to it. And so I started doing new music and Baroque. And I met, I think his name is Wilderly. He's gone through different couple bands, but he's a really wonderful musician. I met him in the train. He was playing banjo and like with this real, whiskey and cigarettes voice, singing the stuff that he'd either picked up while he was in the South or wrote himself. And I dropped a card, and it was a very enterprising undergraduate, dropped my cheap little card in his case saying, contact me, I'd love to play with you. And so I started learning how to improvise, playing out like by the last stop on the G or something like that, with these 4 very lanky, very white Southern dudes. And then just me, short me, playing violin, classically trained. And, during shows, I'd be like, why can I not play open strings anymore? Oh, they put the capo 2 notches too high. Okay, great. And so then you just kind of, I started playing with all these outside groups and learning what floats in one group doesn't work with another, what works in one idiom does not work with another one, just by virtue of getting out there and trying and failing a bunch.
You're pretty active on the social medias, which, side note, I hate social media so much. And there's literally no way around it. And I'm like, I hate social media. You know what I should do? I should start a podcast that I can only promote on social media.
Yeah, that's catch-22, isn't it?
So, actually, you promote a lot on social media.
I do.
You have SoundCloud, you have Twitter, you use Instagram, you just funded your upcoming album with Kickstarter.
Yeah.
You post a lot of stuff on Facebook, through both your personal page and you have your fan page. Yeah. So like you have all of these streams. And I in my own experience and speaking with other people, it's very frustrating. It's a very frustrating and a hard balance to strike between like what's the right amount to push your stuff on the world, because at least starting out you start out with your friends, and that's the people who sees all your stuff, and then your contacts grow and your network grows. But do you like consciously like think and work on I'm assuming you do, but like how do you think about how you promote yourself via social media? Because nowadays musicians, that's one of the few options we have, especially in early stages,
right?
And even as you go along, it's still a vital part. Even the president uses his Twitter handle to like promote like good feelings about his policies and stuff. Right. Everyone uses it, and it's become this huge part. And so as a musician, like how do you strike the balance between and how you use your social media presence?
I don't know what you mean about balance. You mean like
it's balancing between making sure everyone knows what you're doing, but also not being like hitting people over the head with it to the point that like, okay, slow your roll.
I want a bumper sticker that says that. I'm gonna just put it on my violin case because I don't drive. Oh God, New Yorker. I actually don't know how to drive. My sister and I keep making this bet every year at New Year's, like, I'm gonna learn how to drive before you, and it's been like 5 years running. Still haven't learned how to drive.
Neither of you?
Neither of us. I still think I'm going to win, though. Well, I don't know if there really is a balance. It's like anything. It's a process. It's not a concrete accomplishment.
I've won social media. Exactly. Yeah, no.
I think the only person who can say that is Mark Zuckerberg. But certainly not Google Plus. Sorry, Google Plus.
That's okay. They're not a sponsor.
Oh, I love that. But to answer your question, let's see. I think it has to do with the way that you write. I've always approached, say, Facebook or Twitter. Facebook more so than Twitter, because I think on Twitter there is so much noise that you need to cut through, or that is very difficult to cut through. At least for the way that I write, I find it very difficult to cut through the noise on there. I completely lost my train of thought. What? Right. I think this is where I was for Facebook. Like it has to do with the way that you write people, because every time you write, you're essentially approaching people to ask them to listen to you, and to convince. I don't think the word convince actually is right, because you're not saying like, please listen to me. You're saying, I have this thing, I have this thought, idea, photograph, essay that I'm putting out there, and if you like it, I hope you keep following what I do. And the way that you do that is I've always wanted to only present very good content, which in my head is heartfelt, of a high quality, like reasonably polished, and also shows a degree of being human, because once it becomes too polished, then it feels false. It doesn't feel like there's an actual person on the other end of the line. And so this balance, it's always like, oh, I have a new gig, I'll post it up there, but I'll also post how scared I am of it, because first of all, it's honest, which is, I think, something that people really struggle with when they present themselves anywhere, not just on social media. So that's very important to me, presenting something that I actually feel, because it you can feel the molecules in a room change when you're that honest to somebody.
Oh, for sure.
And it translates, whether you're on YouTube or Facebook, although it's less transparent to a certain extent. So there's that, you post your gigs, and you also say like, I'm really scared, gonna pee my pants, gonna go practice now. And then you also post the other things, the things that feel really scary and vulnerable and naked when you present it. But then I usually present this stuff like writing because it's something I'm struggling with. It's something that I'm really happy about, something I'm very confused about. Like, oh my God, I'm going on a date. What do I do again? What?
Yeah, that was, I enjoyed that one.
Thanks.
I didn't interact with it. I just read the whole thing. I got a good deal of enjoyment out of that.
Thanks. Well, my hope and what I've seen in terms of response from this stuff is that being that honest in a way that isn't completely selfish and like, look at me, but more like, this is what I'm experiencing. Maybe you're doing that too. Like, maybe this is going to help you. And that's really the reason why I write so much and I post so much. There is a certain extent too where there is a such thing as too naked. There's something that's too brutally honest to the point where it doesn't help, it actually hurts.
Yeah, this is something that correlates to like my earlier point about about stand-up is, people want to be brought into what you're doing. They really do, even if they don't know it. They want to be inspired by what you're doing, or they want to be entertained, or they want to laugh. They want to feel with you. But you have to figure out, one of my favorite comedians, Mark Maron, talks about like early gigs in his career where he was just laying it all out, and it was one of those situations where you're just kind of like, oh, this is too much. Yeah, and so like you bring people into who you are, but you maintain at least a modicum of a barrier, because otherwise it's just too much. It's an interesting, and I don't know, not balance again. I keep saying balance, but it's okay. It's something you have to address and figure out as you move along.
Yeah, that's what social media is so adept at doing. It moves along. It doesn't stop, which for some people and for certain occasions, it can feel like a treadmill. It can feel like it grates on your consciousness, which it does, because it's overload. It's seriously overload. installed the stuff that blocks the feed on my newsfeed, because so much of it was like social awareness and like this is how racism insidiously, you know, all like that, as well as like other stuff on feminism, which there are fascinating articles and they're really important. But when you have all these things tugging on your attention, it's really difficult to sink into that lower level and actually create. So, I mean, I blocked all that stuff. And like what is useful, I would say, in terms of social media, because it moves, because it's not like a book, which stays, is that you find out through trial and error, this is too much. This is just right. This is maybe not enough. Why did this get 50 likes when it was like 2 lines, as opposed to this essay, which I poured my heart and soul into, and that received 1? And then you just, I think what it comes down to is that there's a certain level to which people are willing to expose themselves to their, what's the opposite of benefit?
Detriment.
To their detriment. Thank you. To their detriment. They just do not want to put themselves out there. They don't want to experiment. And just by virtue of the experimentation, you get better at it. There's this lecture I listened to by Seth Godin, who I absolutely love.
He's really great. Yeah.
So prolific and such just a good person. And he was mentioning that he taught this class, and the first class was like, bring your cell phone, and everybody brought their cell phone, and he's like, okay, now you need to call this person and convince them to buy Time magazine. And if you do that, if you just try, you're going to get a passing grade for this class or something. And 1/3 of the class didn't want to pick up the phone. They didn't want to try. And that to me is just like, there is a guarantee of success if you try. Whether it's the success that you picture in your head or is expected by others is a completely different story. And to be honest, in many cases, very irrelevant. But when you don't put yourself out there, particularly as a musician, or an artist in general, you will fail. Like, that is a definite.
It's the one way you can guarantee you won't make it. You might fail if you try, and and you might fail, but you definitely will fail if you don't. Right. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about your Kickstarter campaign and your album. So over the summer, I've never used Kickstarter myself. It's just generally I'm like, oh, I guess I'll give money to this, or I'll give money to that.
Oh, you're so benevolent.
Okay, let me pull back on that. I've done it twice. I'm
You're
not that
gonna flooded inbox of like, give me money.
But I mean, I did. Yours was one of the two. It just happened to be that way.
Thank you. I'm very honored that you did.
Yeah, it's whatever. So, okay. But like I said, I'm not entirely familiar how, like, I'm not super versed in how, like, just, I know it's like, yeah, people give you money and you hit a certain goal.
Yes.
Right. So why, this is getting more people are doing this more and more to fund albums and musicians in particular, because it's expensive, but it's not so expensive that it's impossible to fund. What was the impetus behind actually putting together an album and releasing it?
At this point in time?
At this point in your career, at this point in your life, like, why did you decide that the time was now? I'm gonna do it, gonna raise the money and start recording?
A couple of different reasons. The main one being that this is basically what I've been working up to. I didn't realize it at the time, but like in high school, just working on poetry, working how to make this number of syllables and this idea fit into this form. And in college, not only playing a violin, but studying scores, conducting, figuring out how things go together, in an aesthetic way that's organic for the consumer. And then you figure out what works and what doesn't work within new music. Like, that's super avant-garde. That doesn't necessarily fly when you have this kind of an audience, or that doesn't necessarily fly when you have an audience. It just flies in a kind of art kind of context where it's just a concept. And there's value in that too. The kind of music that I've always wanted to make was, or is, I guess, is just it needs to speak to both the heart and to the intellect, but mostly to the heart and body. So the time to do this was this summer, because I'd been out of school. I finished my undergrad in 2013, did not want to go to grad school, still don't want to go to grad school, even though that decision is still like, I saw my teacher this past summer and she's like, you should be in grad school. And in my head, I'm like, oh, I should be in grad school. But then you go out and then you're just like, wait, no, this is actually what I want, right? I don't want to be this kind of a musician. I want to be that kind of a musician.
And grad school isn't worth the money.
Well, in some ways it is very important for classical training. And for some people, I feel like maybe if I went to Curtis, maybe I would not apparently need grad school.
Right.
But I had a very different kind of violinistic upbringing. But to actually return to your question, getting back from G, going to B, I had been out of school. I'd been taking guitar lessons and figuring out how to play ukulele and reconnecting again to being somebody who's not only recreative, playing music, but also creative, writing about everything that had really been kind of tugging at my attention, saying this needs to be addressed, this needs to be written about. You're feeling this thing and you haven't quite settled it or figured it out yet. You need to figure it out. So it came to a certain point where I'd, gotten to a certain point vocally, gotten to a certain point guitaristically, I guess you could say. It's really fussy. But anyway, I got to a certain point on guitar just saying, this is what I want. I have these songs. They have to get made. If I don't make them now, they will not be made. Because I know at this job I will continue to be further and further embedded in the school. I will have a very stable and pleasing lifestyle, pleasing to everybody except for me.
And this job you're referring to is, we haven't touched on this yet.
I can't say. I love them.
Oh,
I
no.
love them.
No, okay, you don't name anything, but you teach. You
do.
teach children.
I do.
Children?
High schoolers.
High schoolers,
Middle
okay.
schoolers, and they're wonderful and crazy, and my crazy is compatible with them, so I know how to rein in their crazy and channel their crazy.
I don't think there's any shame in saying that's that is not always as satisfying artistically as you might want. Because you obviously you just said that you enjoy teaching them, so it's not you're not trashing the school.
No.
Anyway.
What I mean to say is that, like, I think as a musician you come across these situations that, or people or organizations that overtly or otherwise tell you this is the desirable lifestyle, this is the desirable path, stability, performing for this kind of an audience. And for me, there's always been a very active resistance towards that. There's always been I love John Mayer. I love the fact that he doesn't play runs up and down. He doesn't play thirds, sixths, tenths, and octaves. He writes from the soul, and he can do the difficult things, but the difficult things are in service of the emotion and the idea. And that is what I've always wanted to do. And creating this album, creating this deadline and this goal has been the driving force for me. Because if I don't have a goal, if I don't have a gig 2 weeks from now or a week from now, I will not practice. I will not put the work in, and nothing will get done.
Well, I mean, and why would you? Because when you don't, it's very hard. I've personally never been the type of person that if I didn't have something, like, some people will just practice no matter what.
Right.
And
I'm just like, how do you exist?
No.
I do not understand. This does not compute.
That's honestly, that was actually one of the most difficult things, because trombone players, the supposed path of choice is orchestral.
and nowadays there's no guarantee you even get invited to an audition
Right.
in a lot of places.
Yeah.
And so you spend all this time practicing. You send in your resume, but you spend like several months practicing, and then you might not even get.
Right.
So why? What? Just no.
Exactly.
I'm gonna go. I have a gig Friday night. I'm gonna go practice that so I can play with a ska / reggae band.
Yes.
Apparently, because that's that sounds a lot like a lot of fun, and they're great musicians too.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about like the kind of different things that you have a Kid with a Raging Heart,
Mm-hmm.
and that is more of a up-tempo brash kind of you have your violin playing on there,
Mm-hmm.
but there's also like a more just straight ahead rock sort of vibe, like so that's gonna be that's the lead single, or that's just what you have released on SoundCloud right now?
Yeah. Well, again, I guess the catchphrase after this is going to be in my head.
Right.
But in my head, it's the single, even though it doesn't really fit pop single expectations.
Maybe not. I don't know. Like that changes from year to year. So like
Yeah.
there's very few artists who just can release anything and have it be a hit. So
Yeah.
like Taylor Swift, she has 8 singles on 1989, and they're all different.
Yeah.
And they all are hits. So like
Yeah.
I don't know what really qualifies as a traditional like lead single for an album.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah.
So what is your what kind of things are you looking to put, it's going to be a full length, right?
Mm-hmm.
12, 13 tracks ish.
We're still working that out in the studio.
Great. But what kind of things are you looking to put together on that?
In terms of songs or sounds or
Both, really.
Okay. Well, I guess the 12-gallon bucket that you could put over it is rock.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is the best approximation of where I'm coming from aesthetically. In terms of the actual breadth of what I'd like to go on there are there's a song that is more of an art song in terms of its structure, in the same way that Jeff Buckley's Lilac Wine, or I wouldn't say Jeff Buckley's because it wasn't written by him, but I love his interpretation of it. But the song Lilac Wine is an art song, but at least Jeff Buckley's interpretation of it, it doesn't sound like it because it's played in rock instrumentation. So there's that kind of version of the very subdued electric guitar and, maybe some strings, who knows, plus brushes on the drums, that kind of rock, kind of not. Going through, I would say Taylor Swifty, Panic at the Disco-y, Fall Out Boy stuff, which I love. I love.
I picked that up. I was like, this is like 2006 vintage Fall Out Boy sound.
Yes.
With the violin from Yellow Card.
So happy. So happy. That's exactly what I was going for.
In that was 2006, 2007. That was my first freshman year of college, and I was super into it.
Yes, the stuff is good, catchy melodies. In Fall Out Boy's case, just like an incredibly strong vocal. The guy just delivers in performance and on the records.
Yeah, and it's those melodies are very strong. People shit on Fall Out Boy all the time, but those melodies are strong. And they stick in your head, and it's a difficult thing to do. It's a very specific talent.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. So there's a lot of that. I absolutely love them. I really do. I cannot express enough. I cannot say enough superlatives about how much I adore them. And then there's going to be some instrumental stuff, but there's this piece by David Lang, which I really want to put on that album, which is for electric violin, kick drum, backing track, which is originally written for Todd Reynolds. And they both graciously said, yes, you're more than welcome to record that on your album. So I'm very much looking forward to doing that.
Todd Reynolds is one of my favorite people.
Sorry?
Todd Reynolds is one of my favorite people.
He's wonderful. He's wonderful.
Yeah.
And so I'm just very much looking forward to putting that as the very last track, in the same way that Skrillex will put an orchestral track, orchestral in quotes, at the end of his albums.
Right.
Generally, it's just going to be like, this is the breadth of what I can do in terms of rock, having something delicate and beautiful, as well as like really hard pushing, and in some ways like a Broadway patter song where every syllable is accounted for. And then I can also really play violin, and this is very important to me, but it's not the focal point of my musical career, or at least that's not the way that I intend it to be.
So how's that going?
Oh, the album?
Yeah.
Oh, it's going pretty well.
Yeah.
I'm very, very excited. I'm actually still writing a little bit, just because those songs were from the very first intensive round of me writing, where I would just write and not eat or sleep normally. There are a couple of songs on there that I, over a period of 48 hours of sleeping intermittently would have written, and that kind of thing. It's very exhausting, and so then you hit the pause button. So I'm doing that again. And I'm hoping with this round there are going to be a couple of different songs, because if your lead single, quote unquote, kind of complains about you living at home and feeling trapped, and you're currently somewhat peripatetic, like maybe that's not going to ring as true for some people at a certain point. Definitely not for me when I need to perform it out and tour it. So yeah, still putting, like, the entire frame is there. It's a question of actually filling in, plugging in the missing slots, I guess.
So, and in the midst of all this, you're still teaching and gigging and all this stuff.
Yeah.
Has that been how has that challenge
It's
worked
fucking
out
crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
The thing is, it's crazy at times in the way
Right.
that a musician's schedule is like, oh, there's nothing for 3 weeks, and now
there's 14 things over 4 days.
Right. Right. So, I mean, I don't know if I've gotten any better at managing that. I'd like to think that I have, but I'm always an optimist. But yeah, I mean, there are some certain times where, like, if you're playing a gig at the Met, you're like, this is where my focus needs to be. I cannot think about creating, because playing and organizing 11 people, like composers, plus the ensembles, plus performing in the entire 3-hour show, and organizing, everything about it, and just being like, yes, we're performing the stuff that the crowd would want to hear, but also saying, composers, can you write the stuff? That will require you firing on all pistons, and you cannot write while that's happening.
Yeah.
But then you have to get better at, I guess, you meaning me, I need to get better. Let's be real here. At setting aside, those sacred times during the week where, like, I will just write, and I cannot pick up my phone. I don't care if there's a fire going on down the street. I'm going to sit down and write, and it's going to be scary as heck, but I need to do it. So.
Have you been performing any of the songs around,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
early response?
Yeah. Well, it's been good.
Yeah.
I'm super excited. I'm actually playing a house concert on September 11th at this wonderful singer-songwriter's place. His
It's
name
over
is-
on Riverside.
Yes.
Yeah, I saw it on.
Yeah, Matt
a friend of
Siffert.
mine.
He's a wonderful, wonderful musician, and
Yeah.
just a very open-hearted person. So I'm going to do acoustic sets of what I've been doing.
Oh, okay.
And then I have a couple of shows lined up, but I'm still finding the right people to do them with. Mainly on my docket is just this. I'm going to be doing a 3-hour show at the Met Museum again, but this time solo, so that's, like, really scary. Not only asking composers, like, hey, can you do a Sia cover? Can you do a Beyonce? Like, very, like, virtuosic, very difficult stuff. But also being like, I'm going to play Brahms, and I'm going to play really difficult sonata stuff, which I haven't done in a long time, which is, like, really scary. So that's where a lot of the forethought and performance preparation is going at the moment.
So do you have a target release date yet, or is that still?
It's a little bit up in the air. I would like to have it out in January, but we'll see. And I always thought of it as a summer album, so it might be a little bit later than that. But that's that's the target, not moving. It's just the target.
The broad target is January.
Right. Yeah.
Cool. This has been great. I think I really appreciate you sitting down with me, and this is.
Well, thanks for asking me to do this.
Yeah, it's awesome.
The new adults are dying all around you, punching in the hours just to get through. Spirits take forgotten names, crooked backs and sparkless eyes, overstrung feet and chains. They say you can't run on dreams of a better life, and I scream like a little kid with a raging heart. I'm so full of passion that I'm falling apart. This won't give my soul what it needs or it wants. I'm a little kid with a raging heart. Living in with mom and dad in this prison of a home. The way they love you makes you wish you had a quiet place to call your own, but it's all too convenient. Spend what you should be saving up, afraid to fail and crawl back begging, but you're terrified of staying stuck. Gonna scream like a little kid with a raging heart. I'm so full of passion that I'm falling apart. I don't know what my soul needs or wants. I'm a little kid with a raging heart. Overthinking my desire, my friends said I was obsessed. Tired of being paralyzed, summoned all the nerve I possessed. I pleaded, let me love you, the hell did I expect? Your words said no, your voice said yes. There's nothing to do except scream like a little kid with a raging heart. I'm so full of passion, I'm breaking apart. I can't help my soul, it's you that it wants. I'm a little kid with a raging heart. You don't know why, you don't know how, you don't know where you're supposed to be. Might not survive if I don't break out. I'll listen to what you say when you say what you mean. I'm a little kid with a raging heart. I'm so full of passion that I'm falling apart. This won't give my soul what it needs or it wants. With a raging heart, distressed and passion, scared and frantic, falling apart. I can't give my soul what it needs or it wants. I'm a little kid with a raging heart.